Hello folks, it's Duncan at Free as an Eagle. Just wanted to check in and say hi. It's been a few weeks. Did a lot of hiking, took a mini vacation last week, so had a lot of fun but didn't get as much work done. But we're back, took a nice hike in the White Mountains, went down to the ocean, did some kayaking in a lake, so we did a lot in a few days, and now I'm attacking some of the trickier little parts of this project. Just giving you a little look of the outside. We've come a long way in the last months, and we had a very dry summer, so that made for good working conditions. And we recently put this porch roof on. We actually just framed this little porch a few weeks ago, and that was kind of a big step forward. That was the last big build out that was needing to happen, and we got that done. So I'll give you a look at that. It's kind of glary, the sun's swinging around the house right now, but it's a good working day. So yeah, we framed this little porch at the same pitch of the A-frame itself, and we're very lucky because the windows, I planned this in detailed exactly what I was going to do after these windows were already in, so I barely had enough room to fit the roof under those, but I was lucky and that did happen, so that's going well. My last three windows for the back end have been ordered and they're supposed to show up next week, so that will be really cool. So anyway, this little porch is going to have the entry door out here and then some stairs. So the off-center inner door was done to make the rooms on the right side bigger. So it's offset. That was driving my wife crazy, especially once this was framed, but the outer door is symmetrical. And speaking of symmetrical, this morning's project actually has been one of the tricky parts on this porch. Probably the trickiest part is the side little walls are very easy. Little knee wall, little soffit area up underneath, which I'll zoom in on for a second. So yeah, so the green under here is a soffit, and I painted most of the wood before I put it up. And then this big overhang actually mimics the south end. We've got 2 feet at the bottom, or is it 18 inches, I think, and up to 4 feet at the top just to bring some overhang over the stairs to keep the weather off of them. And so the tricky part was, I had framed this, and the walls, nothing was absolutely perfectly plumb on the end. We kind of put this together a little on the quick side, so I had to shim it out at the bottom to even everything up to compensate for the fact the outer pair of rafters were not perfect. But having done that, then the final part of this end wall would be to build it out with plywood, which you can see a piece of plywood over there. So I'd shimmed everything to make it even, and then cutting this plywood got really tricky, and it took me an hour to cut this one piece of wood. I drew a little picture on a piece of paper with all the measurements, and then actually cutting it and then making it fit was quite a trick. And this piece actually, and one of the benefits of building with a certain degree of symmetry, I wanted to center this door opening, and then I had these little tricky pieces that jut out over the soffit, and there's eventually going to be soffit wood, just like in most of the rest of the overhung areas. There'll be pine, of which we have quite a bit of made up and stained. In fact, if I walk out here, I can zoom up a pile. Had my son up here yesterday, and he took a bunch more boards and stained and polyed them, so those are going to become the soffit in here. And I may do the whole ceiling out of this wood. I've got quite a bit of it, so it makes a pretty look. And so anyway, the tricky part was to get this, let me see if I can zoom this back out. Okay, that's a little better. Okay, so this piece of plywood on the right was actually cut for the left side, and I had to do a little fine tuning to dial it in where it fit right. And then I thought, well, you know, if I did my work right and I was careful enough to make this symmetrical, then the piece on the right should flip around and be a mirror image and save me a lot of work, because a lot of tricky cutting and angling and measuring produced this piece. And so luckily I took it out from the left side. I won't bother to try to demonstrate it, or I'd have to put the phone down. I would probably lose y'all. So I took the piece, I had it wiggled in there. It seemed to, I trimmed it and made it fit good. Then I decided to take and bring it over here, and lo and behold, it did fit almost perfectly. The only difference being, I can't really explain this, but I've got to add about 3/4 of an inch to the left side, and where it hangs beyond the corner, I've got to subtract about 1/2 inch, and then that'll fit perfectly. So all I got to do is lay that on a sheet of plywood and draw the pattern and add a little here and a little there to make it fit, and then that will be a perfect fit. So that saved me the trouble of having to do that whole operation over again. That would have been a pain in my rear end. So once those two are in, then the pieces traveling up above that are relatively easy. They just follow the 64-degree roof pitch, and they have a cutout for the door. And then the upper triangular piece will just be a single triangle that'll break on that header. So anyway, big progress on a small porch, but I'm glad to get that done. And I think now I'm going to take a little break for lunch. And after that, I'm just going to make another piece like that, install it, and then I've just got to work those other pieces, which are relatively easy. So that's today's project. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll let you know when the next thing happens. Have a good day.